Disney finally dropped the first trailer for the Darth Maul TV show, and it is nothing like what we expected. This has been one of the most anticipated projects in the entire Star Wars slate, with Dave Filoni at the head. So today we're gonna break down the trailer bar for bar and tell you everything you need to know about the project. So strap on in, baby, it's about to get spicy because this is... First off, the thing that I am most happy about, they finally told us when the show is actually gonna be coming out. Bring out your calendar because this bad boy is dropping on April 6th of this year, but that's not the only reveal we got. Lucasfilm is actually dropping a comic issue for the show on March 4th. That's going to serve as a prequel appetizer, if you will, for the series, and that's very interesting. The Star Wars slate that we got at Star Wars Celebration in Japan didn't pay that much attention to this series in particular, but it looks like this has been one of the biggest priorities for the entire studio, and now we know exactly why. You see, one of the biggest reasons that fans should be paying attention to this series is who is behind the production team. Shadow Lord is being built from the ground up by the same team that brought you the Clone Wars, Rebels, and the Bad Batch. I don't want to butcher his name, I apologize in advance, but Matt Michnovitz, awesome, is at the helm of the writing team, who handled some of the darkest and most psychologically complex arcs in the Clone Wars. And of course, we have everybody's favorite cowboy, Dave Filoni, overseeing the story direction. This is all hands on deck, from the story to the animation. The show is being produced in-house by Lucasfilm Animation themselves. This matters a lot because Lucasfilm has developed a very clear pattern over the past decade. When they want to add lore, they use live action. And when they want to fix characters and bring the world back on track, they start using animation. Think about it. Animation is where Star Wars truly starts to slow down. It's where moral ambiguity is allowed to breathe. It's where the villains can meet the protagonists in the middle without being softened or redeemed every single time. And Shadow Lord is clearly being built to live in that space, just not in the way that we initially thought. When you see the trailer, visually, the show is signaling a huge tonal shift. The animation is darker, the shadows are deeper, it feels like a living painting of sorts. Neon skyscrapers, stark reds and purples. It's a crime noir feeling within Star Wars, way darker in terms of the score as well. If you think about it, this is closer to the spirit of Andor than anything else we've ever gotten in animation from the studio. The aesthetic isn't just a random choice, it's reinforcing what the story is supposed to be about. Not the heroes jumping in at every second, not the Skywalkers. It's about getting the chance to see one of our favorite villains and truly understand him during one of the most chaotic periods in the galaxy's history. Mi gente, sidebar. To really understand all the details that we got in this trailer, we really need to go over where Maul has been and how we got here in the first place. No, this is not gonna be a full breakdown of Darth Maul's story. That's gonna be in a whole separate video. Make sure you drop a sub if you want to see that one. Consider this the Spark Notes, if you will. If you're already caught up on the story so far, you can skip to the timestamp right here. Luis, Jimmy, do your magic. Point these sweet people in the right direction, okay? You see, after being cut in half during the Phantom Menace, Maul returned during the Clone Wars. This is where he built the Shadow Collective and becomes a key figure in the underground crime syndicates in the center of the Star Wars universe. He gets directly involved with Death Watch, the Pikes, the Hutts, who we got to see in the trailer as well, and most importantly, he plays a huge role in the takeover of Mandalore. This is where the story starts to get juicy. Everybody's favorite geriatric emperor defeats Darth Maul and his brother, Savage Opress, and directly tells Maul that he has other uses for him. Our boy later escapes Imperial custody and continues to manipulate Mandalore in the Clone Wars Season 7. That's where we saw the siege of Mandalore. And then he vanishes for however many years right after the chaos that happened during Order 66. In Star Wars Rebels, which is set 1 to 5 years BBY, Maul is broken, obsessed with Obi-Wan Kenobi and the Sith's destruction. Then he gets the chance to face his demons head-on by dying a warrior's death on Tatooine by Obi-Wan Kenobi's blade. Full Kurosawa style, this shit is perfection. What we didn't know is that in Solo, basically 10 BBY, a hologram revealed that Maul was actually pretty active during the height of the Galactic Empire, serving as the head of Crimson Dawn, which is a major crime syndicate. That is exactly why we get Shadow Lord, to cover the time period between Order 66 and what Maul was doing before we get the chance to see him in Rebels. Now that you know the basics, I need you to lock in because we're going neck deep into the trailer. Visually, this thing is awesome. him. We see Maul just as he appeared in the Clone Wars. Mechanical legs, a familiar silhouette, but his posture is really different. He no longer feels like a coiled animal waiting to strike. He learned from his battle against Darth Sidious. And judging by the dialogue, we can see that he's become kind of a cynic, telling who we can presume is Talon that he's going to show her the galaxy as it really is. There's a bunch of shots of him overlooking the city in a Blade Runner style montage. And while we're talking about that, Janix looks amazing. It is a dense world full of crime, back alley deals, and people living just beyond the Empire's reach. It's repeatedly described to us as a world that's untouched by the Empire, but the trailer makes it pretty clear that that shit was temporary. We got to see the stormtroopers make an appearance. They got a whole ass Star Destroyer looming over the planet. The Empire is closing in on this underground world. The thing I like the most is that we clearly see that Darth Maul is over all of the Empire's crazy antics. He mentions that if you push a little bit too far, even empires can fall. And this isn't the language of a rage-driven warrior like we saw last time. It's the determination of someone who has learned from his mistakes, painfully as hell, I might add, and has realized that raw power isn't enough to get you over the finish line. The show wants you to understand that this is the origin point of the Syndicate version of Maul that we glimpsed in Solo. Which brings us to the most consequential part of this entire story. Listen, for longtime fans of the show, the appearance of this Twi'lek rang every single alarm bell in the best possible way. Her name is actually Darth Talon, and she was first seen in the Star Wars Legacy comics as a Sith assassin serving Darth Krayt's one Sith order. This was happening more than a century after the original trilogy. She became iconic, not just because of her design, but because of what she represented, the dark side's persistence beyond the rule of two. Behind the scenes, George Lucas himself loved Talon's design so much that he once considered her in his original concepts for his sequel movie series. Press F to pay respects right now, truly a big fat L for all of us. Specifically, he wanted to frame her as an apprentice for Maul, who had become a crime lord at this point. Now you start to get the connections. Shadow Lord is looking to resurrect that unused idea to make her canon and reposition her earlier in the timeline. This matters a lot because Talon isn't just a cool visual callback or an Easter egg. She solves a huge problem for Darth Maul's story. Up until now, Maul has been a dead end. He's had no legacy except his rage, failures, and disdain for the Empire, no student to take on his learnings, and no future beyond obsessing over Obi-Wan, which led into a pretty awesome moment of him getting turned into sashimi by a geriatric Gandalf. By giving Maul an apprentice, Shadow Lord transforms him from a tragic remnant of a story from the past into a story of continuity and legacy built from the perspective of the dark side. Talon becomes the embodiment of Maul's central question: can I build something that survives my own life? And that question is dangerous as fuck. Our boy Maul knows exactly what it means to be shaped by cruelty and discarded when you're no longer useful. If he repeats that cycle with his new apprentice, the series becomes a commentary on how trauma is always replicating itself. But if Talon actually pushes back against his teachings, and if she evolves beyond his rage, then she becomes Maul's greatest failure and his biggest success at the same exact time. Either way, one thing is clear: this story matters, and Talon's presence fundamentally changes the stakes of this story. This is the part of the video where we tell the tinfoil historians of the Star Wars universe to breathe and chill the fuck out. Because, chronologically, Shadow Lord actually makes sense. In fact, it sits in one of the most important gaps in the Star Wars canon. After the Clone Wars, Maul vanishes. In Solo, surprise shotty, he returns as the head of Crimson Dawn. By the time we get to Rebels, he's isolated, unstable, and spiritually broken beyond repair. This series will serve as the connective tissue between all of these projects. It shows you how Maul will rebuild his power after being discarded by the Emperor. It explains how Crimson Dawn forms from the ground up, and it gives you full context into Maul's eventual psychological breakdown by letting us see his last real rise to power. That's what makes this show so exciting to watch, at least to me. We're watching a Maul at the peak of his powers. No master, no leash, just survival, ambition, and pure resentment. This is also the only point in the timeline where Maul can start to believe, shit, maybe I can actually get a win in this war, which is exactly what makes his tragedy in Rebels hit that much harder. Let's take a step back, okay? On a franchise level, Maul Shadow Lord is doing something super important. It's testing whether Star Wars can have a villain-led narrative without the Jedi getting meddled in at every chance they get. yet. Whether they can tell stories driven by crime, politics, and moral compromises in animation, because we already got it in Andor. Most importantly though, it's going to test whether they can have concepts from Legends adapted by function, how they add flavor to the story, not strictly retconning them just to sell more toys. If this series works, it sets up a huge precedent. It tells Lucasfilm that animation can be the space where you can clearly close a character loop, add morally great characters, and really messed up power structures. And again, most importantly, bring back underused concepts without doing a full-ass reboot for all of them. This opens the door to deeper stories about the Inquisitors, dark side cults, and thankfully, post-Skywalker Sith stories. When you zoom out a little bit, Maul Shadow Lord stops being the Darth Maul TV show, and it becomes something way larger. On a character level, it's about a man who was used, discarded, and left behind by history, and he's trying one last time to redeem himself. On a thematic level, it asks whether power built on resentment can ever truly become legacy, and I think that's exactly why this series matters so much. Not because Maul looks cool or because we're getting a red Twi'lek Sith girly in the mix with fancy animation. Instead, it's because this is the one chapter of his life where Maul is finally allowed to ask the question, if I'm free now, what do I choose to be? We already know how Darth Maul's story is going to end. Shadow Lord is not trying to change that at all. This is more about understanding the character at a deeper level than what we already know. So, as we wait for the series to drop in April 6th, here's the question that I'd love to know your thoughts on. Is Maul trying to build a legacy, or is he just trying to prove that he was worth having one in the first place? Let me know what you think. I'll read you out in the comments.